But when it really boils down to it, the crux of the whole issue, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? Generative design differs from the idea of sustainable design insofar as you wouldn't describe a sustainable marriage as a very happy, healthy, or strong marriage. It would be merely sustainable. Regenerative design, on the other hand, focuses on employing the best parts of ecological understanding, natural systems, what makes them last, what makes them healthy, what makes them strong, and looks to employ those principles through systems thinking to make products, services, and businesses across the board that are more appropriate and resilient for our current times. XIII has been chosen as a name for some of its cultural significance. You'll see that in buildings, even now, will often be missing a 13th floor. This actually dates back to the church when it first separated itself and tried to make itself different from the pagan ideologies, wanted to move people away from the connection with natural cycles, the primary one being the 13 lunar counts of the year, which is what all harvests have been based on for time immemorial. And to choose to do this as a company is to try and actively reconnect ourselves with these natural cycles. And there's even further examples within the culture. For example, the tarot set, the 13th card, is the death card, which rather than being symbolic of an end of life, is symbolic for a great period of change. Systems thinking, as mentioned briefly in the previous question, is looking to employ the most intelligent parts of the oldest teacher we've got, nature, in terms of how it manages its resources effectively, efficiently, intelligently, and in a considered way for the health of the whole system rather than a small concentration of people when we talk about in terms of a human system. What we're trying to do that's a little bit different is we're trying to employ this kind of thinking across our whole business, not only from the products and services, but to how we get feedback from our customers, how we can employ other principles like decentralization, things from blockchain, and how we can make our product and services best fit the current social, political, biological climate. Buckminster Fuller, obviously one of the originators of systems thinking, famous for his Dymaxion maps of the world and introducing people to geodesic domes. This idea of being efficient, doing more with less, isn't to say we were trying to be more efficient in terms of it being a more industrialized or manufactured process, but being more intelligent with the existing resources we do have, which are always only ever in a finite supply. And we need to start thinking more broadly speaking about how we can get the most from what we've already got, rather than looking at the potential production, mining, or creation of virgin materials. Fashion obviously refers to what is in season or in trend. And obviously we want to be, not wearing the wrong temperature clothes at the wrong time of year, but this idea of making new stuff and buying new stuff merely because it is what is fashionable only adds to the further degradation of our commonly lived environment. And to think in more general systems terms means to think about what happens at the end of the life of your product, of your jacket, or of your shoes, which is something that even the most sustainable fashion brands will regularly miss the mark on, if at all. So technical metabolism is a term coined by systems thinker William McDonough, and it's a way of thinking about technical materials, wastes or seconds that aren't being metabolized or reintegrated back into the system, the social system of goods and products in meaningful ways. Obviously, biological metabolism, wood can biodegrade, cotton will break down over time, but things like polyester or ultra high density molecular weight polyethylene, which is an absolute mouthful, but like climbing rope, sailcloth, Kevlar woven, CAD design, neoprene in our wetsuits. All of these materials don't have intelligent ways to be reused. And that's what we're trying to focus on in terms of this idea of technical metabolism. Just post-fashion mean to me? Obviously this is a bit of a new term for some people as well, but harking back to that idea of being in season or on trend, being fashionable in highly uncertain times is a bit of a shameful waste of resources in lots of ways. And this idea of being post-fashion in the same ways we're trying to think more broadly in terms of systems thinking is we think more broadly in terms of our patterns of consumption for something that is merely just fashionable. You know, this is just more obsolescence and more waste. And we are actively trying to position ourselves by making goods, services that can last the length of time and provide the most good for the most amount of people and species more generally, not just us. You know? In a time where we're having to think more laterally, and obviously we want local solutions to local problems, but this idea of being post-fashion and thinking more broad spectrum, I'm making a lot of claims here, and if you can't verify those claims, why would you trust me? And we already have a number of other companies and projects that make any number of claims, and frankly most of them aren't traceable at all. And if we want to really build trust with our community, we need to be able to back up all the claims we make. We already have this system of accountability and traceability when it comes to value creation in terms of high quality food and produce, or art, this idea of terroir, this idea of provenance. Why do we not have a provenance of the things we own and the things we wear? Again, in terms of that systems thinking and more broad spectrum thinking, the international flag of planet Earth was actually developed by, I'm pretty sure it's a Swedish graphic designer, and apologies for not remembering his name right now. But it was meant to represent exactly that. It's first and foremost, I might be a so-called Australian and Eora local, but I'm a citizen of Earth for all of those things, and we all are, despite what our passports might say. And if we are really serious about having impactful change in the world, we need to open our lenses a little bit, and as part of that is also realizing that nothing exists in isolation within a system. As as a person who obviously grew up in this area, spent a lot of time outdoors, climbing, riding bikes, being generally active, and then also spending a lot of time traveling, used a lot of gear, break a lot of gear, and I know what it means to have to replace the whole of something you spent good money on because only a small component of it is broken. And again, we think about showing the appropriate respect for the things we make and the energy, material, and time when it's making them. This is just kind of a shameful obsolescence. And I think it's really important that we start to think about what we really want in terms of value from the things we are buying and spending our good money on. So in terms of how we can apply modular design, modular thinking, as a more general approach from a systems point of view, if you buy a bag from us or a lanyard from us, it will work with every other bag you buy from us. And in the same way, if you buy a hat from us or a pair of sunglasses and the lens breaks or the arm snaps or the chin cord gets ripped off or whatever happens in the course of you using it like you normally should, you don't have to replace the whole thing. You can replace a component of it, but it's not an afterthought. We're putting this in design from the forefront. Systems and fit is related to the systems principle of structural coupling, this idea of a harmonic fit between a thing and its environment. And this idea of systems of fit, as we talk about, we don't want fashion based on trends, right? Well, I do want a warm coat in winter and I want a sun that works in summer. So this idea of systems of fit is making our ranges not only modular in terms of being appropriate in that way, but also appropriate in their primary function. Our first range marsupium is a system of carry. It's a way to carry your important things. It's not just the lanyard or the phone clip or the bag. It is a complete system of fit where all of the components are interchangeable, so there is less wastage. Having the good fortune of growing up here, I've spent my whole childhood, like so many of us, in the great outdoors, in the bush, at the beach, in the river, jumping off a rock into some water. That lifestyle, I think, gives so-called Australians and Eora locals a certain rapport and respect for the natural environment and those ecosystems. And I think it gives us a shared sense of value in being able to maintain those, not only for our own pleasure and enjoyment, but for the people that come after us, looking into this idea of being a good custodian. Again, as part of this Eora Sydney local lifestyle, and as a so-called Australia more generally, where 80% of the population lives within 100 k's of the coast, and then 80% of that's all in the southwest pocket. Being around the water is fundamental to a sense of identity for so many of us, and again is one of these shared cultural assets that we all revere and respect and want to look after, and at a much deeper level has been the lifeblood for the community living here long before colonialism. And if there was ever a place to start, we're a common place of respect, obviously the bush, but the harbour that we all share and all of our lives are based around. It's so fundamental to that. Eora, Sydney, was once upon a time the top of a mountain range, and 7,500 years ago when the seas rose, that mountain range, those rocky outcrops, the sandstone, became what we now call Sydney Harbour and this coastline. And it's a quite unique geological ecosystem in Australia, insofar as it's the only area in Australia where local Aboriginals, instead of painting on the walls in terms of their art, they would carve it into rock. And we've all grown up with this as part of the shared landscape that we've all been part of. And it's a massive part, again, of what I think makes up Sydney's cultural identity. Obviously, being fortunate enough to have such an active lifestyle growing up and spending so much time in these different environments, as mentioned, we all share a common respect and appreciation for these natural environments. But also, we spend a lot of time doing stuff outdoors. We spend a lot of time climbing up in the mountains, or riding bikes around the neighborhood, or surfing in the harbor, or sailing in the harbor, or surfing. We've got excess sailcloth, we've got extra wetsuits, we've got extra rope. We're quite uniquely suited in that respect. We are one of the largest cities in so-called Australia, but we spend the most of our time outdoors as well. And there's a very nice sweet spot there where I think it's a perfect place for this to start, and for us to know that the supply chain we're looking at is traceable and ethically sourced. As mentioned, obviously growing up in this area and being lucky enough to spend a lot of time outside, I've been doing various activities in the bush or at the beach my whole life, and have been fortunate enough as an adult to get to travel around the world. And through that experience, I've seen some good ways of doing things, some bad ways of doing things, but in a more critical way, I know what works and what's going to be useful at the time, and I have a more profound appreciation for the great things that we do have here. And I would love to think that I'm in a good position to bring some of that knowledge and expertise from my time abroad and using these products to their absolute limit, that I can make a better version of these things. Obviously, it's pretty evident it's a pretty tough out there for a lot of people, not just in so-called Australia, Eora, but around the world. And it's hard to feel hopeful sometimes that we are able to make meaningful changes in the world. And if nothing more, I think this is a good use of my own skills in the best way I can to try and be of service to my own community, and to be of use, as a human in the long run. But when it really boils down to it, the crux of the whole issue